my guest today is someone I worked with recently, talks about body, mind, and business. And so I was just going to, think about that as a subject matter for a few minutes. When you think about your business, do you think about your body and your mind, or what percentage split do you think about business, body, and mind when you're working? What do you think? Anyone got any insights into what they think
Do you have
about?
an example of what you mean by that?
Well, I think it's about sometimes you're supposed to work on yourself. Sometimes you're supposed to work on your business. Sometimes you're supposed to work on your physical performance and ability to actually, eat properly or something like that, so that you work
Okay.
better. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. Hi, hello, Tidy and White. Hello, Tidy and White. So nice to see you. I'll get Deborah to explain it much better than I can.
Okay.
But, do you only think about business? Do you ever think about your own health, mental health? I dropped my pen, but
Absolutely. Yeah. But I not necessarily together.
not together. Well, I think
No.
that's what Deborah is going to talk about. Is I think that you should sometimes think about these things in a more joined up way as opposed to being as separate. I mean, I think I tend to think about things if there's maybe I'm thinking about my health front of mind when I don't feel very well. I think maybe actually I should be thinking about my health sometimes when I do feel well. So sort of you sort of think about that, and I guess we have business health and things like that, all different sorts of health to think about. So who else has come in? Hi Susan, thanks for joining us. Who else is here? Hi Marga, nice to see you here. Hi Reggie, don't think we said hello to you either.
Nigel, I don't think, sorry, Karina here. Hi.
Hi Karina.
I don't think proactively about body and health and mind with my business, but I definitely notice its effects on my business.
Right.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
So you notice the impact when you don't think. Hi Reggie, have you got a thought about this? Here's Deborah.
Yeah, I do. So I'm in the creative space like yourself, and I mean I feel like creativity is very much tied to how you feel, how you're thinking. Creativity is a mental activity, but you're actually physically producing something as well. So I try to think of them in a conjoined kind of way. You know, they're definitely tied together. And there are days where creatively, like I just don't have it. And so, and that may be because I don't physically feel well, or I'm just tired, or stressed because of something else. So it very much ties into the work that I do as far as creative work, and ultimately what am able to produce on the business side. So I feel like maybe there's some industries that people work in where it's not so closely tied together, but I think for creatives it's maybe more tied together than some others.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying there is that in creative businesses we have the impact of that much more than we maybe should do, or do we put the burden on ourselves when we're thinking creatively? You always hear about creative burnout and things like that. So maybe that's something to think about. Welcome, Deborah. Hi, Mona. Very, very good to see you all. Now, Deborah is going to be our guest, and so Deborah, I've just sort of introduced the concept about thinking about our bodies, our minds, our businesses, and all those things. And I know you're going to talk about it, but what I thought I'd just do first off is probably just put you into two breakout rooms actually. So there's a few kind of, some of you know each other, some of you are new to my world and also to the Brand Lab, and maybe just have a general chat about body, mind, and business. And do you want to just give a sort of one sentence summary of one sentence under pressure about what they should be, what people should be thinking about, and then we'll get back together in 5 minutes.
Well, it's really to piggyback on what Reggie's saying. I consider my greatest preparation work is self-care. So I can't coach if I'm not self-cared up. Creativity doesn't come, intuition doesn't come. And I've been in positions where I took that lightly, and then a client called in a need, And I didn't have the inner resources to tap into that, because truly, Reggie, what you're saying is, I think we're all creatives. When we're really honest with ourselves and we're in our zone of magic, if we don't get out of our own way and allow that creativity to flow through us, we're kind of showing up, not, I don't want to say a fraud, but it's pretty extreme for me in my experience. So really, that's Body Mind Business is really the holistic thought around that, and how can you take care of yourself and in your body and the way your mindset is, so that you can show up in your business.
Thanks for that introduction. Slightly more in depth than mine was, not surprising. So maybe just for 5 minutes, why don't we all go into a zone of magic in a breakout room? Do introduce yourselves to each other, let you know, just top level who you are, where you're from, what you do, etc. But have a little chat about, about your zone of magic. So just two small breakout rooms, so you can just have a little less formal chat, and then we'll get back together and we'll share some more work. So I'm going to open all the rooms, see where you end up. Have fun. So welcome to the Brand Lab. I'm just going to quickly introduce today. And the Brand Lab, it's something that I've created to really share and talk about branding, and it's for anyone who's responsible for a brand. So if you're a brand owner, if you manage people's brands, if you're a brand creator, and anything to do with branding really. And I particularly like to think about brands in depth, but I sometimes think that it can get overcomplicated. So I actually try and demystify the branding process, and that's what I believe that we should be doing all the time as creatives. And I also really think that when we look at branding, that actually the individuals, the brand owners, have the answers, and our job is really to help draw those answers out for them, not just to come up with our own kind of way of thinking and impose our sort of views on people, but actually help bring that out. And so I help to untangle those brands and create much more clarity for the audiences. And today I'm going to introduce you again to a guest who I worked with earlier on this year. But I just want to sort of say, why is branding important to me? It's because actually it's about creating an emotional engagement with your audience. It's really important that you can do that. And lots of brands can coexist. It's not about one brand being better than the other, but it's about having that emotional connection with the brands that you actually love. So I use Adidas, I use Likenex, I like to go to Costa, I don't go to Starbucks. I have a method for doing this, which is all around this idea of a brand donut. And if you understand the vision, position, the offer, the values, and the mission, you can actually help to tell a much more coherent story. Now, there's lots and lots of parts of a brand, and I go through 3 phases really. One which is about the insight, one which is about the story, making it unique, and then also finally about making it memorable. And I sort of visualize this as a big complicated jigsaw, and lots of different parts, and you spend lots of different time talking about these different things. And today when we talk to Debra, even though I sort of did a little bit of her on the insight and the story, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the visual sides of the design. So I just want to stop our screen share and introduce you to Debra Jones, who I met probably in December this year, wasn't it, Debra? Last year, obviously. And do you just want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do? I think you're on mute, but there you go.
There we go. Yeah, so that's what I mentioned in the breakout room. I started Body Mind Business back in 2010, and then worked as a coach for several years before I've got this download to go inside corporate, and I've done that, and I continued to, and I went out of that, and I've been working with a job as a director of operations. And so when I met you, and I've, even though in and out, I think with all of us who really live our vision, it wouldn't matter if I'm inside a company, outside a company, coaching as a clerk at a drugstore, that you live your vision of creating more consciousness, or whatever that vision is for you. For me, it's really creating consciousness and being that awareness and a spark. My deepest desire and kind of magic is working with successful entrepreneurs who have an overextended team. And so we work with that, trying to really create the whole body, mind, holistic culture and that triple bottom line. So that is people that I'm, currently working with and love to work with.
And why did you decide that you probably needed to refresh your brand? And obviously then you found me, but what was it that made you think that it was time for a rebrand? Because you've been doing this for 8 years or so, I think.
Yeah, so since almost 12, right? So 10. And what was funny is, so when I'm still working as a director of operations, and so I'm not, and we have full freedom to operate. So I've gotten that organization in a really good place with our team, and it's operating freely, and so I have the capacity to think of, okay, I can take this beyond what I'm doing, and it's almost been a case study for me, the work that I've done with this company. And so I haven't been in a high urgency to find clients, and so I really wanted to think, okay, who do I love to work with, and what does that feel like, and really tapping into that. So I was working, we have a mutual friend, and we meet fairly regularly, and I was really diving into who I love to work with, the ideal client or dream customer, whatever that might be. And he sent me your donut PDF, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this is great, because it's kind of like, it reminds me, we can't see the label from inside the bottle. So it's a little bit like being on the show, What Not to Wear. I don't know if any of you remember that show way back where.
I'm still wearing it.
Yeah, well, yeah, may I never be on that show. But it's like, how are you presenting yourself in a way that other people see you? And so after I filled out, I think you noticed fairly completely, your donut PDF, which was awesome. So I was getting more clear. It's like, okay, I know who I want to work with and who I am working with. And so how do I am I presenting myself in that way? And so, of course, with, you had a complimentary chat, so we got on a chat and we're talking about my current logo. When you told me it was decorate, because I asked you, what do you think of my logo? And you're like, well, it's decorated. And I'm like, decorated? What the hell? Like, to me, that's like saying it's bedazzled, right? I don't want anything bedazzled. So I'm thinking, gosh, that's not representative of who I am now. And I've definitely matured in the coaching and the style and how I show up in the world. And so it really, that line, I could see it in the way that you were seeing it. I'm like, that is not representative of who I am and what I do in the world. So the working with you, Nigel, and peeling back, it was a delight, because it was a bit of self-discovery and why, and how anchored I was in my vision, and pulling that out. And you do definitely some inner work, and from music to colors to all those things that.
Well, I'm just going to share a couple of pages, actually, if that's okay. So obviously, sure. As Deborah said, one of the things is she looked at my brand donut, did quite a bit of work herself to navigate around what the audience was, who what the offer was, and had a really good understanding, and then sort of said, I filled in this donut, but I need to chat a little bit more about it. So one of the first things that I sort of looked at was really just thinking about the audience, and it's always a starting point. And I noticed this thing between two sides of the audience, two sides to the coin that Deborah was talking about, is that she's kind of dealing with corporate exec managers, so that's the kind of corporate work, human resources, but she's also dealing with like what we call side hustling moms, and sort of noticed that these were also very resourceful humans. So straight away we sort of had this dialect between the two different types of audience. Now, quite often in branding, people say you can only have one offer for one person, but it seemed that there was a relationship between the two sides of that was something that we should really kind of consider, how someone may become a human resource person and may have been, or may become a side hustling mum after they've been a human resources employer. And I just sort of thought, you know, just having a conversation, and these weren't long conversations. These were like, you know, we had probably two 1 hour conversations to really understand. And then the other thing was actually this illustration that I just showed is to, I sort of first off asked about the name, and we're never going to change the name, but to think about, you know, what does body, mind, and business? So body about how we live, the mind how we think and how we work, and quickly came up to this sort of proposition around getting all these better would change your life. And that was really the starting point, wasn't it, Deborah, for thinking about your brand before you get onto the logo design? I mean, how was it when you when I kind of fed this sort of stuff back to you? Because you've been doing this for 10 years. How did that feel?
No, it felt, I mean, I've always admired people with words, you know, have efficiency with words. And I'm like, when I looked at that, I'm like, well, that's my landing page right there, like in a visual. And I'm very visual. I think most people on this call are visual. If I can't see it, I can't even hear it. So mirroring back to me, it's like, yes, that is it. That is why I do what I do. And that is my values and beliefs right there in a simple drawing.
So the next bit really, I mean, the main reason you wanted was you wanted a new visual identity. So gave me this sort of slightly impossible brief: create something that can't be seen, but once it's seen, it can't be unseen, which is obviously in itself was a bit of a sort of puzzle. Anyway, so after the conversations, quite quickly, I came up with a solution that I thought would work for Debra's business, and it was this sort of using this image, and this is the final logo, just go straight into it, this image of a butterfly, which came up with this idea of, you know, change and metamorphosis and how it could change your world. But, you know, very early on, I'd sort of decided that, you know, the two butterfly wings could be two B's for body and business, and then it was all about how to get the center point to be the M. And so that idea, you know, this is the final resolution, and all I wanted to talk about a little bit here before we get into nitty gritty about things is that actually I think from a creative point of view, one of the most important things to do for the creators in the room is all about crafting things and making sure you go into detail. Because as you remember, we came up with the idea, you know, it looked like this fairly early on. I'd sort of sketched this and went, I've got this idea, it's a butterfly and it's got wings. And you liked this, didn't you, from the start, Deborah?
I did, yeah, I did.
You kind of felt this was working. And then it was like, well, how do we actually get that to work? Because sometimes it was too obvious, sometimes it wasn't obvious enough. And I just sort of put this is just a snapshot of some of the work that we went through, just as a memory for you here. And just always sort of looking at different ways of doing it, getting a little bit more uniform in the approach, sort of trying different ways, getting a little bit more, you know, thinking it more butterfly, then eventually putting bees back in and getting really near the end, trying to level things off a little bit. But I think, again, from the creative point of view, you've got to keep on crafting things. The final version just has a very small tweak at the end, really to make it more legible at much smaller sizes. And that sort of way of working is what you need to go through. But you enjoyed the process. You didn't sort of think, oh my God, here we go again. More butterfly. In fact, you actually submitted some drawings, I remember.
I did. I mean, I was doodling. And the butterfly, I liked the idea of the butterfly and what it all means and the freedom and transformation and all of that. But I was concerned it would be too girly because I'm not very girly. And so, you know, I think it was the process of, you know, I'm pretty balanced, you know, I'm very feminine, but yet I work with a lot of men. And so I didn't want to only attract, you know, I didn't want it to be too pretty. But it is pretty, you know.
It is, and it was that.
It is
so,
pretty.
but it's bold and pretty at the same time. But you can't. And
exactly.
I think that was one of the things that it was hard. It had to have sort of a femininity to it without it being absolutely girly. I think is what we talked about, because none of us really wanted that at all. And then at the end, we kind of thought about, you know. So I was very keen that you embraced a bit of playfulness in the brand rather than just always have a very rigid approach. I kind of at one point talked about confusion as well with things, so kind of making words go upside down and round and back to front, because that's how your mind can be. And then the last bit that we did, you know, we thought it was quite important to make this into like a, you know, more active thing, and so we created this little video that I'll show, which should maybe come up in a second. So there you go. So it's quite a simple icon, but quite a lot going in there. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions to ask you, Deborah, about either what you do and the branding that we've done together, or any questions about anything in general, really. So Jeremy's got a question.
What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah. So
Oh.
I wasn't entirely clear from that. I understand how the branding works, but I wasn't quite sure what you actually do.
Right. Yeah. So I coach. I also do create systems. I always say like the highest mountain I've ever climbed was out of the bell curve, because I'm 3 standard deviations off on analytical and intuition. And so in order for me to be comfortable with that in my body, I get a download and I execute, and I get a download and I execute. And so that can come with, and I'm in a space, what seems really obvious to me, it's like neon lights. I go into operations, like in a manufacturer or things like that, and I see the obvious, like, did you not, I asked my daughter, she went through, spent a day when I was working with an operations group, and I'm like, okay, you tell me what it is that I do. And she's like, you make everybody's life easier. Like, okay, I like that. I like that. So it can come through systems, coaching, mindset, really the whole, I'm really all about systemization, but with the human element in it. Like, people tend to put systems in place, but they forget people actually use the systems. And how do we bring that the people that are in the systems are honoring themselves and their values and that kind of thing. Does that help?
Well, yes. I just want to sort of pin you down, the poor butterfly down on this. But what practically what you actually do with a client? A client comes to you. I need your help. What actually happens?
Yeah. So we'll generally look at current state. What is it that they usually, people that come to me generally have an urgency. Like they're in a pinch point of life. It's either like, like Nigel said, like a work with kind of 2 extremes, working with the successful entrepreneur who has a team, who's either there's something going on with their business that was working fine, but now they're in a pinch point, or they're not delivering, or something's all of a sudden there's a cog in the wheel that's just not working. And so what is it? And so we look at current state. What are the things that are, just a snapshot without any judgment? Let's just take a snapshot, look at current state, pause, and look at all the pieces. And then, okay, what in an ideal world, what would you like that to look like? And then bring that, okay, how do you get from state A to state B in the most easeful, joyful way? And, and like I said, usually it has some urgency. So usually my clients are like, okay, I will go to the trenches, to the ends of the earth with you, but I can't drag you with me, right? So it's like, we get in, I call it at the pace of love, because sometimes that's like really passionate and you're in there and working crazy. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's navigating that, and then really putting things in place. So after we get that kind of established, then how do you maintain that higher level of being, and where everybody's working in their, if it's a team, I'll take each individual, find out what their values are, what it is that they love to do. A lot of people I find have great skill sets, but they only like 60% of the things that they do well, right? Just because they learned how to do something doesn't mean they actually love doing it. And so the other thing I do is like, okay, look at all the tasks that need to be done in any business. So if it is a solopreneur or a CEO, like, okay, all these things need to be done in to run your business. Okay. And then we do an inventory of all the people that they have. If you could do anything of this list, which were the things would you pick? And we really break out of roles. People find us like, okay, I found out this one gal, she loves to do back-end testing of this, that we put software in place in labs. She loves to do the testing, but she also really likes lead generation. Well, that role nobody would make a role for that, a position for that. So we really dive into like, okay, how do we create the culture where everybody likes to come to work? And sometimes, people leave, right? That they find out that they're not a good place for it. So
do you think, though, that Deborah, that things have changed a little bit in how businesses are starting to care more about the person behind the role? as opposed to it's just we need someone to fill a box. I don't know, Jeremy, if that's answered your question, but lots of training and coaching to help people be better at what they do is the sort of area that we're talking about. Do you find that the world has changed now to sort of think about those things more? Is there more need for what you've done, or people actually think that they've got it all covered now?
No, I think there's definitely more need now than there was 10 years ago. And I think that's what's behind the whole Great Resignation, right? People have been forced to work differently and recognize, wow, I can work differently. And then when they're kind of forced back to work, they're like, no, I don't want to do this. I didn't realize that there was a different way. And so some of that mindset and thought freedom became realizing, wow, I could do it a different way. And so I do think I'm finding for myself that there's more people leaning in, where before it's just like, you have a job, you fill the job.
I mean, it'd be interesting to know from the rest of the group if anyone feels that, I mean, I feel like I'm doing the same job that I've always done, but I definitely am aware that I'm doing it in a very different way than how I was, and I've had to probably change some just the way that I think about people in relation to branding a lot more in the last few years than I'm sure in the first 10 years we just did what we wanted. I'm sure that's what it was. But anyone found that it's shifted, even if it's just subtly, or is it just business as usual? Anyone got any thoughts or opinions? It doesn't matter. Anyone got any more questions for Debra about what she does or the branding? Hi, Amber. Yes.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to take everything away from your conversation, but I'm interested to ask, because you were talking about design and how it looked girly, it looked feminine, and how landing on a butterfly was more of a sort of feminine thing than perhaps other logos are. And I wondered if any of you read this book, Why Men Like Straight Lines and Women Like Polka Dots. Or heard. I'm reading it at the moment, and I think it might be bollocks, but it is really interesting to hear about what other people think, because I mean, in a nutshell, I haven't read it all yet. This woman who, she has done some science. I mean, she's got surveys from the past 100 years, asking men and women, artists mainly, and designers, about how they design and what they perceive people to like. And the idea is that women prefer design done by women, and men prefer design done by men.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's the whole thing about lines and dots. Again, you have to stick with me. This isn't my idea, so I don't necessarily think it's right. But the idea is that the hunter-gatherer thing, our sort of primal knowledge kicks in, because women like dots because they are gatherers, and therefore they like picking berries and flowers. And they're used to going into undergrowth. They also have a heightened, better colour vision, so they're more likely to pick bright colours, because they can understand and they can read them better than men, because men don't have the same amount of cones apparently in our eyes. So that's quite interesting.
This could all be true.
Lines because it's the left brain right brain thing, but it's partly an order to it, but also because the hunting philosophy is that when men were hunting, they're looking at the horizon a lot, but they're also looking at moving objects. So they're interested in functionality and things that move, whereas women are more interested in two-dimensional round things like polka dots and things that are heightened and coloured. And also they prefer curved lines. And there's been loads of studies done on design as well, where, say a group of men and women to design chocolate box, and men will design triangles, squares and rectangles, and women will design oblongs and circles. It's quite interesting.
I think with all these things, there's always an element of truth about it because of how things have developed. And I think when back to doing the visual identity, whilst Debra was saying not overtly feminine, it was the right thing. A butterfly, when you're talking about change, is the metamorphosis. And also butterflies are colourful. So the analogy was sort of the right approach and right direction. It was just fortuitous that the business was called Body with a B, M with a mind, and B for business. And so it actually kind of worked. So someone's put in the comments there, it sounds like social conditioning. I think, Corinne, you may be right, is that we've just come to accept these things over time. And I think there is a lot of psychology that goes into design, colours, shapes that we aren't as aware of. If you could put the name of that book into the chat, that would be really helpful.
The thing about colours is probably the most scientific thing they talk about, because actually women do see differently. They see a different colour spectrum to men. So it does make sense in some ways that women might be more attracted to stranger or more sort of more shaded colours that perhaps men can't see. But also apparently it's very specifically on the red spectrum. So men are more attracted to things like blues and greys because they see it better, whereas women see red, which is also possibly why the whole pink blue thing comes in, because it's literally, even you talk about social conditioning, but scientifically women can see reds and pinks better than blue. Well, they can see reds and pinks very well, and men can't. So if you split between them, that's the colour, that's the way they go naturally, just because of the way that they see colour, which is quite interesting as well.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, and please do drop the link or the title of that book, and we'll check it out. Has anyone got any other questions about the Body Mind Business, about the creation of the brand, or what Debra does? If not, I'm going to move on to some brand news, where I'm going to talk about something that's current in the moment in the branding world. Excellent. Well, thank you, Debra. It was lovely working with you. And I know that we miss having our conversations about branding.
Definitely.
So I'm sure we'll do something else again in the future. I'm just going to move on to something else, and let me just go to that. You see my screen? So each week, month, I also want to talk about something that's current and maybe something that's going on in the world. If anyone's ever got anything of interest that they've seen in the branding world, bring it along and we can chat about that. But quite a lot of the press this week has been going on about Netflix and why it's not working anymore. And I thought I'd just share my sort of insight into that. If you're not familiar, everyone's turning off Netflix now. They've decided they've had enough, and I think there's reasons for that have been quite visible for probably quite a long time. I just want to talk a little bit. One of my segments of my donut that we don't go into quite a lot is about positioning and how you talk about a position of a company, and it's all about how you put it in relation to the competition. So how is your business relative to the competition? How do you see it? How do you want other people to see it? And I think if I just use the example of Netflix and the growth of UK video on demand, think about a positioning. So positioning, normally you have a grid. It doesn't matter, 2 axes. It doesn't matter what it's going to be. But with this sort of taking specialist content or more general content, which is a very broad brushstroke of the type of content, and also then what is the platform offering? Is it free, low cost, or is it slightly more expensive? So Netflix came out 1999, 23 years ago. It first started doing its thing, probably positioned as fairly specialist. It's TV and films. So that's quite limited in terms of content. And it was, an average sort of price of about $5.99, $6.99 or something like that. And, it was happy days for it, really. And it's just got on and done its thing. It's quite a while that afterwards, YouTube really started to establish those. You're talking 5-6 years later, it's every bit of content you can almost think of. Some of it obviously not legal, but it's kind of totally free. So they've positioned themselves almost diagrammatically opposite, whatever the word is. Anyway, so they're quite different really to what Netflix are doing. And then sort of another few years, you get something like Amazon come along, and they've got more content than just the videos. So they're probably more of a sort of generalist. They're a little bit cheaper than Netflix. And then other competition starts coming along. BBC eventually launched iPlayer. It's not quite free. It's sort of free-ish, but you have to pay a license fee to use it, really. Now TV, which is a Sky thing, comes along, kind of mainly sort of piggybacking off Sky content. Eventually, things like ITV, they come along. Don't have quite as much reach. They are definitely free. And then sort of in the last couple of years, everyone sort of piles in Apple, BritBox, Disney Plus, all at these different sort of price points and sort of positionings. And again, when we do workshops about positioning, often we put these charts on and then spend half an hour, or half a day arguing about who should be where and for what reason. But that's the whole point about trying to position these things. But I think when you start to think about it in terms of what the competition and what their offer is, you start to see that Netflix's problem is that they're going to get totally squeezed now by Apple and Amazon and Disney, and they just won't really they won't have the sort of richness that people buy into the Disney and are prepared to pay more for Star Wars. Netflix, with all the money in the world, are never going to create the depth of content of Pixar and Star Wars franchises and the Marvel superheroes and stuff like that. They can create new stuff, but it'll never be as deep in people's minds. And Apple and Prime Video will probably slowly add in more premium content and maybe increase the price. And where do Netflix go now? And that's what happens if you don't quite get it right. So it'll be interesting, as Netflix are thinking, we might do a free thing with loads of ads on it. Well, actually, people may not want that. And I'm just curious to know if anyone has got an opinion on what Netflix has happened to them. And what I would say is that if you're thinking about your own positioning, you do need to think about how you want to stand out or blend in with the competition. Sometimes people piggyback. So if you're launching a new service now, you might sort of try and be around Netflix's area because you think that you can piggyback off what Netflix are doing. You've got to think about three things: your audience, your competition, and the offer. Keep thinking about those in relation to everyone else. And often when you start a plan for a business, you start off in one quadrant with a decision that you're going to move further up the chain, so to speak. So you have to think about where you're starting as opposed to just where you're going to go. So I'm just going to stop my screen there. Stop that. And does anyone else have any thoughts about how Netflix have got it right or wrong recently?
My perception was they were very good value because compared to Sky, which was it seems a fortune to me. It could be £80 a month if you have the full singing and dancing. It seemed quite pretty good value. Sky
is very expensive, but the Sky version, really now TV, is quite cheap in comparison and more expensive than Netflix. But Now TV kind of brings together some of the best of some of the Sky and some of the stuff that Netflix can no longer get hold of. And it is about £2 or £3 a month more. I mean, do people feel that when you see something like, Netflix loses, I don't know, market capitalization of $40 billion, do you go, oh, well, they deserve it, or I'm surprised? Or do you have any kind of response to thinking, actually, I mean, I even already, I'm hearing in the pubs, loads of people going, yeah, I'm going to stop Netflix. And it's just almost like a virus. People are saying, well, I'm going to stop it now. I'm going to get off Netflix. And do you hear around about these brands and the impact that the global, global news stories are having on them, like Twitter being bought today by Elon Musk and stuff yesterday? Does that impact? Karina?
I think with Netflix, for me, just as more companies have been coming in, like Disney and like Apple, and they're like, well, this is our IP, we're going to take this really good content. Netflix has been left with a lot of just the crap. So it's become like the worst video store, and you can never find anything to watch. And that's where it's sort of gone downhill for me personally.
And I think they'd be really sort of saddened, wouldn't they? Because obviously when they started out as probably the only video store, they've quickly kind of become that bad video store on the corner. As everyone's gone, oh, there's money to be made here, we'll keep our stuff on our platforms. And I think that is a challenge. And I'm just kind of curious when as I think nearly everyone here are business owners, and do you worry about what the competition are doing in relation to what you're doing? I mean, not sure how many of us are as big as Netflix yet, but those sort of similar challenges can happen to us if we're not as wary about what we're actually offering to the right audience and what the competition. I'd be curious to know if people are actually looking at the competition in general. Hello, Deborah. Thank you for joining us. You're on mute, but here you are.
Yes. Hi. I'm the other Deborah. Deborah with an O, I guess. So one thing I was thinking about is how all these different services make it more confusing for me as a consumer, because we want to watch Amazon because there was that thing on Amazon, but then we're like, oh, but then there was that thing on Disney Plus and then Netflix, and then suddenly we have like 3 services, and I'm kind of confused, and then different logins, and I end up not watching probably as much. Maybe that's better for me, but maybe not as good for the companies. I don't know. So that's just something I noticed. As for my own business, I think it brings up the question of how do we each stand out given that there are other people, which you alluded to in your slide that you just shared. But this person might do what I do, but maybe they have a science background and they focus on those kinds of topics. So I think that's just one of many ways to stand out. So I think that there always is there is a way to differentiate ourselves, and I think it's sort of interesting to figure out what is that and how do we find it. And then how do we talk about it? That's one of the things I'm endlessly fascinated by as a business owner.
Yeah, and that's the second, the the quadrant of my donut around the 2 o'clock mark about positioning, thinking about your audience and the competition, and really understanding that in more depth. And I always say to people, look at your direct competition, so the people that are doing exactly what you're doing, but also learn from the really big players out there, because you can absorb some of their hard work into your brand by actually learning from them. And don't be afraid of that. You're not copying them. You're not going to copy their logo. You're not going to go off and set up a business now about body, mind, and business and put a butterfly with a BMB in it or anything. You're going to create your own version of what that might be and make that your own thing. But you can learn from what other people are doing, and I always encourage that. I mean, do you spend a lot of time worrying about competition, do you think, as a whole? Or
I think for me, Nigel, I think it's important to consider competition and to look, but comparison can kill you, right? If you allow it to kind of pull you into a direction, if you're not fully anchored in what the why that you're doing what it is that you're doing, and how you show up differently, or how you be in your authentic self, you can get pulled along in a different direction that may not be who you are. And I get back to if you're in a bad relationship, right, eventually over time you wake up and you're like, I'm in somebody else's dream. Where I think where Reggie started at the beginning is, you have to know who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, and trust that you're going to get there and you're right where you need to be without comparison. Consider, yes, but don't compare.
Yeah, consider that. I think that's a really, really good way of expressing it. So thank you for that. Now, every week I also say, if you've got any questions about your brands, I'm more than happy to answer them direct here in the group. Mona's got a question, so I'll answer that straight away.
Nigel, what do
Hi,
you
Mona.
think about Fiverr or people per hour? Because normally I'm not worried about the compensation, but I found Fiverr and people per hour quite annoying.
When people put what, sorry?
People per hour or Fiverr, those are the platforms. Yeah, you can easily find someone who design a logo for you for like $10 or £5.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So if for those who are not in the creative thing, there's a platform for Fiverr where you can just go and get a logo done for £5 for an hour. And Debra could have gone and done that, but she invested with me. And I think it's our job to make sure that we tell people what makes us different by coming to you, Mona, or coming to me, than going and just getting it done. Now, I think there's certain things that I would say to certainly people wanting to use creative resource that people on Fiverr can do just as well. If it's like some massively repetitive or something that's quick. I mean, I can't use Illustrator, for instance. I don't know how to draw on computers. I can draw with a pencil. And if I needed that turning into some graphics, I would just give it to someone on Fiverr. But to actually create your brand, get that deeper meaning and get that more emotional connection, I would say keep reminding people what makes us different rather than what makes them bad, actually, is the important thing. So I did get a question this week from someone I actually met this morning. And it's a question that I often get asked, and I think a few people who've been here before, Jeremy, I know you asked me this question. I'm going to, for the benefit, people often ask about the difference between a personal brand and a corporate brand, and which is the right one. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things about that, and then we can maybe talk about that, see if it's something that resonates with people. So each month, I'll do some brand untangling, and if you've got questions, send them to me by email. And this was from Carrie Moss, who has this business. It's called Military Matchmaker. And she started off just helping lonely hearts, if you like, in the military, servicemen and women to find matches and stuff like that. And she was asking, is it better to have a personal brand or a corporate brand? And I think, Debra Jones, BodyMindBusiness is the corporate brand, but it's very much Debra Jones doing this. I have Pin Creative, and I am actually me. I am Nigel. I am a person, but I don't really talk a lot about my personal brand. I talk about Pin Creative quite a bit as well. I talk about the fact that I've got this corporate brand, and it's quite important to me when I'm working with corporate businesses to be able to say that there is a business behind it. I've been working independently for 10 years, as not employed by companies for 20 years. I've had another business before this, so it's good from a practical point of view. But me as a personal brand, rubbish. If you start searching for me online, you'll never find me. You'll find Welsh rugby players and you'll find chess players. And if you've got a more unique name, Mona, you might come to the head of the field more than a Nigel Davies, which is a very sort of boring name. If you put in Nigel Davies brand consultant, you'll find me probably top of Google without any SEO, because it's just a unique combination of words. If you put in Pin Creative, again, unique combination of words. So I would think about your personal brand before you even get too far down the line, is how unique you are, whether you're going to invest in time in your own name versus someone else's name. Because if your own name isn't that unique, it's going to take you quite a lot of effort to get there. But if you're not very unique, get known for what it is that you do. So always put your descriptor in there. I've got a sheet that I'll send a link to, I'll download it, but ask these 10 questions, score it from 1 to 5. And it really helps you decide whether you've got more of a me brand, just being one person, defined by who I am, I'm already well known, versus being a more corporate brand. And it does help this to kind of create that differentiation. What I would say is that I sort of slightly regret not being more Nigel Davies when I started my independent life 10 years ago, but I know that Pin Creative does help me in terms of getting onto some opportunities. So there's a thing there that you can download. And do people find that it's a continual battle between the me and the we in terms of branding? Anyone experience their corporate and their professional brand in the room? I know that Debra has a corporate brand. Brian, you have a corporate brand, I think. Jeremy's got one, Montalute Films, and he's also got himself. Yeah. And what's your corporate brand, Brian?
Riverside Corp Consulting.
And do you think that is as well known as Brian Altimus now? Because
No. It's
yeah. Because I know that you're well known for who you are because of how I've come across you. So how do you use your corporate name these days?
So I'm, well, that's a good question, actually, because people still come to me because of my personal reputation. So the corporate brand was originally established to provide limited company vehicle for contracting. And now that I'm sort of changing, or have changed the way that I work, it's interesting how whether I still actually need that corporate brand.
Yeah. So Debra's just put in the comments as well that she has a corporate name but is using her own name, the Debra Ager, because obviously you're becoming more well known for who you are as a person. I think maybe that's the journey that I'm on. Maybe in 5 years' time, Pin Creative will cease to be that important. But if you've got any question, any month, any time, just ask me a question about branding, and hopefully I can give you some insight into that. So I'm going to wrap up shortly, but before I go, has anyone got anything else that they want to ask whilst we're all together? And then I'll go on to the last segment. No? Okay, hopefully you found this useful. I'm very much appreciative of everyone's time to spend an hour chatting about branding, just branding, no, didn't mention marketing today. We'll talk about that maybe another time. Thank you, Debra Jones, for being my guest today, and please connect in with her and ask her any questions. The last thing that I will always do is talk about music, obviously, because I'm a sort of a music fan. So I've got a recommendation this week, and this week it's one of my favourite albums from last year, which is a band called The Fabulous Corettes. I'll put the link in the chat in a moment. So The Fabulous Corettes, they're a band that they're from a duo from Brazil and Denmark, so it's quite unusual. And this album is called Back in Mono, so it's recorded in a very old lo-fi style, and it's just 60s tinged garage rock, and it's very, very, very good. I must say, some of the reviews of people who've read it can express it better than me. So here's one: crooked girl group love songs fed on a diet of bathtub amphetamines. So there you go. That's the Corettes. So the Fabulous Corettes. So I'll try that out. And there's a song called it's called where's it gone now? I'll get the name right. Want You Like a Cigarette. So I've never smoked and never had a craving for cigarette, but as a love song, I think it's very good in terms of I used to want you like a cigarette. Now it's over. Bye bye, lover. So Fabulous Corettes. I'll try and put that into the links now, just so so you've got a link to that, and I'll send an email around with some links as well after this meeting. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully you've found something useful out of this. Do come along next month. It'll be more or less the same thing, different guests. Ask me questions, think about things that you want. If you see anything that you think is really exciting in the world about branding, maybe not as obsessive as me when I'm reading the paper and just start thinking about these things, but yeah, do share. So it's been great to see you all, and see you next time. Enjoy the Corettes. They're fabulous, literally.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Deborah.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
you. Yeah, nice meeting everyone.